Good evening and welcome to Chicago Tonight. I'm Paris Schutz. Brandis Friedman is on assignment. On the show tonight,
we need all this in our area.
As residents and businesses grapple with COVID-19, a new health center opens on the south side. Amanda Vinicky reports in Chatham, the next stop in our In Your Neighborhood series.
December and January and February are going to be rough times.
A coronavirus vaccine may be imminent, but the head of the CDC says the next few months could be the toughest in the nation's public health history.
Many's the time I've been mistaken.
And Grammy-winning jazz singer Kurt Elling on making music during a pandemic and returning to Chicago. But first, some of today's top stories. Harsh words for Illinois Democratic Party Chairman and House Speaker Michael Madigan from Mayor Lori Lightfoot. Lightfoot stopped short of calling on Madigan to step down from those roles, but says having elected officials who are compromised is, quote, the wrong direction for Illinois. Madigan does not currently have enough pledged votes among House members to remain Speaker and is implicated in a wide-ranging federal case against ComEd. Lightfoot says the public has to have confidence in political leadership.
That's what the job demands, is for us to step up and to lead. And you can't do that if you don't have the legitimacy of the people that elected you in the first place. So that's not just a statement about Mike Madigan, this is a statement about all of us.
And Illinois public health officials report nearly 11,000 new cases of the coronavirus in the last 24 hours, with 192 additional deaths. That makes for a total caseload of nearly 760,000 known cases with 12,830 deaths. The 7-day test positivity rate is 12.3%, and we'll have more on the current record death toll later in the program. If you're a Cook County homeowner and curious about next year's property tax bills, you can now get a sneak peek. The Cook County Treasurer's Office says first installment property tax bills are now posted online. Payment is due by March 2nd of next year, although Treasurer Maria Pappas says late fees will be waived until May 3rd. Chatham is a neighborhood on the far south side of Chicago. And the latest data for the coronavirus shows that the positivity rate in the 60620 zip code, which covers part of that area, is 9.6%. That's slightly lower, actually, than the citywide positivity rate, but not by much. We last visited the area in April when rates in Chatham were disproportionately higher than the rest of the city. And Amanda Vinicky and producer Marissa Nelson returned to the Chatham area as part of this week's Chicago Tonight in Your Neighborhood series. And Amanda joins us now.
Yeah, Paris, I'm here by the Whitney J. Young Library in Chatham. This is a largely middle-class area. A lot of seniors live here, and according to the latest community survey data, it is 95% black. Among the most famous of Chatham's residents, well, Chance the Rapper grew up here. Also, there's a park named for another famous musician who once lived here, Nat King Cole. And while the residential area is famous for its quintessential bungalows, there's one house that really stands out. That is the Blue White House. Yes, it is an actual replica of the White House, but it's not white. It's painted in eggshell blue. 6th Ward Alderman Roderick Sawyer represents part of the Chatham area and says early in the pandemic it was a real struggle for residents and for business owners. But he says particularly restaurants have been able to pivot and learn to operate in the new normal.
They're adapting and adjusting, just like all the businesses in the city, and I think we're actually thriving right now. So overall, we're doing well. We can do better, obviously, once we get back to normal. But it's also giving people an opportunity to taste and experience food that they've not experienced before with the new delivery systems.
One of the prides of Chatham, that is Brown Sugar Bakery. Founder Stephanie Hart says she couldn't find anyone who made pineapple coconut cake like her grandma used to when she was a girl, so she came up with her own recipe. Friends loved it so much, she decided to turn it into a business. She set up shop along 75th Street's Restaurant Row.
This is such an amazing neighborhood. Chatham is a steadfast street. There's not many streets like this in America, where you have businesses, black-owned businesses that have been in business. Lim's Barbecue, 66 years. Soul Vegetarian, 40 years. The Shoe Shop, 45 years. The Wood Shop, which is an art gallery, almost 50 years. I wanted to be among people that were able to succeed, if nothing else but the longevity. I needed that strength.
But she says 2020 has been a challenge, and not just financially.
It's frightening when you have people that depend on you, and you've got to make decisions whether to be open, whether to stay closed, how do you keep them safe? You know, it's just been a lot of challenges.
She says it has, however, forced her to modernize, and that has been the savior. The bakery teamed up with a third-party delivery app that charges a fee only to the customer, unlike a lot of other apps where a fee is also charged to the restaurant itself. And next week, she will be able to start shipping nationwide her famous caramel cake. Now, president of the Greater Chatham Business Alliance, Richard Rutan, says that while some businesses have adapted and invested in the community, others have not.
You know, almost like a medical desert, if I could say. We had Walgreens was the only thing that was actually in our community where we were able to actually get prescriptions from. Then you had Jewel's, Osco, but you know those are two long-standing companies that has actually truly shown their support in our community. But you know, CVS is closing stores down, Target is closing stores down. So a lot of places that we were relying on has actually turned their back and walked away from us.
But this may come as a surprise to those who are opposed to so-called big box stores. He is among those who are thankful for Walmart. The company just reopened its store in West Chatham, and it came back with not only a fully remodeled supercenter, but also a healthcare clinic that has physicians and optometrists. The health center has transparent pricing. That means that those who don't have insurance will know upfront how much they have to pay. It's $60 for a checkup. For a kid, a checkup will cost $35. Walmart's health market director says it grew out of conversations with the community about what was needed.
They needed to see affordable, accessible health care here in the community. It's about the relationships that we have with the communities themselves, the members of the community, and about answering the needs based on what other services are available in this area.
The clinic has now been open for just about 2 weeks. It reopened at the same time as the rest of the entire store, which had been closed since June after it was looted during civil unrest.
I can dig on being upset with the police because me being a black man, believe me, I done got some raw deals from the police.
But Larry Armstrong, who lived in Chatham until about a year ago, says looting the Walmart just inconvenienced residents, particularly those who are elderly and had to go to the trouble of switching their pharmacies.
You know, people that work here, they lost wages. You know what I'm saying? And that's money out their pocket. The kids, you know, a lot of things they just took for granted. You know, a lot of them wasn't really trying to protest anything. They was just taking.
Now, he and other Walmart customers say it's better than ever.
We need all this in our area instead of having to go way across town to get the same thing.
I love this Walmart. It's close to the home. It's more beneficial than having to travel all the way to Cicero, which is what our nearest one would be for the city.
Tiffany there says she's planning to take advantage, putting some holiday items on layaway. And while she is also happy to be back shopping at the Walmart, Lorraine Armstrong says there's plenty else that Chatham has going for it.
Chatham is an area where you have middle-class people working, people who go to work every day, who want to try to have homes, who want a better life for the kids in school. And you know, you just want to come out of the ghetto, so to speak, and live in a decent area. And that's why I particularly like Chatham.
She says with the expressway that cuts through Chatham, as well as the Red Line, it's also really easy to get around. Now, Walmart also opened a healthcare clinic at its Austin location. As for the Chatham Healthcare Center, no dental appointments yet, but that is coming soon. And Paris, let me tell you, as somebody who spent hours in the parking lot talking to folks and preparing for this story, it was really busy all day long. Back to you.
Good to see things picking up in Chatham. All right, thanks, Amanda. And now to Phil Ponce and a warning about the winter months. Phil.
Paris, a vaccine may be coming, but right now the U.S. is setting new COVID-19 records. More than 100,000 COVID patients are currently hospitalized, and just yesterday, some 2,800 Americans were reported to have died from the virus. The director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention predicts the U.S. could reach 450,000 deaths by February. Here's some of what he had to say yesterday.
December and January and February are going to be rough times. I actually believe they're going to be the most difficult time in the public health history of this nation, largely because of the stress that it's going to put on our healthcare system.
And joining us now to talk about the impact on hospitals and staff is Dr. Susan Bliesdale, Medical Director of Infection Prevention and Control and the Acting Chief Quality Officer at University of Illinois Health. She specializes in diagnosing and treating infections. Dr. Bliesdale, thank you for joining us again. Your reaction to what Dr. Redfield said, that the coming months could be the toughest time in this country's public health history.
It's true. You know, I think that we're hitting a pretty dramatic increase over the last month. And then we saw that there's been a lot of travel around the Thanksgiving holiday, and that's likely going to lead to a second rapid increase on top of what's already happening. And then, of course, we get to the end of the year and the holiday season and the new year. And unless we can minimize our interactions with those outside of our household, it is likely we will continue to see increases into January and February. And so I echo Dr. Redfield's concern that we will likely see dramatic increases that will put strain on our hospital and other healthcare systems across the country, unfortunately.
Dr. Bliesdale, what do you make of the prediction that there will be a, quote, post-Thanksgiving surge? What do you make of that?
Well, you know, we saw a dramatic increase as the weather started to change and people started to gather together in probably the last week of October into November. And then we're already starting to see some increases. And we saw how many people had traveled and come together. We're starting to hear anecdotal cases of people that were exposed to other family members and friends that they gathered with on Thanksgiving. And then there's all the people that had traveled and had interactions with people outside of their household. Typically, when we've had some event, we've seen some peaks. Shortly after the 4th of July weekend, we saw an increase. It takes a couple of weeks before we see the severity of illness impacting the hospital. So we're starting to hear about cases, but likely in about 2 weeks, 2 to 3 weeks, we're going to see a dramatic increase in hospitalizations related to the holiday gatherings, unfortunately.
Today, Governor Pritzker at his COVID briefing talked about his concern that if people don't mitigate what is happening regarding COVID, that the healthcare system could be overwhelmed. Let's hear a little bit of what he had to say today.
I look at it and I say, how can people not follow the mitigations, watching the number of people who are passing away, not just in the state of Illinois, but the thousands now a day across the United States. I just hope that people are heeding the mitigations that we're asking them to follow, because that ultimately is going to bring that death count down.
As far as preparations at your hospital, how would you say your resources are? Should there be a new surge? Should this post-Thanksgiving surge come to be, say?
So we've already seen a surge pre-Thanksgiving, and then we've seen a slight increase already this week. We have a dramatic increase to the number of patients that have COVID in our hospital compared to mid-October. We had in the single digits, and now we're in the 60s to 70s of patients with COVID in our hospital. We also right now are trying to manage both COVID-infected patients and COVID non-infected patients. We have to maintain our operations and our response for everyone. So right now, we are somewhat in a strain currently. So if we see an increase in the number of patients that are coming into the hospital without getting enough patients that are discharged, we're going to have a strain on our healthcare system. And those that have the COVID infection tend to, when they get hospitalized, need to be hospitalized longer than patients that don't have the COVID infection because of the complications. They end up on ventilators, they end up needing to be in the hospital for a longer period of time. So with the increase we already have, we likely will not be able to discharge the same number of patients to make room as more and more infections rise.
What are you hearing as far as the availability of a vaccine, say, to your staff?
So this is the only light and hope right now, is that we have 2 vaccine candidates that likely in the next 2 weeks will get emergency use authorization. And the preliminary data shows that they have high efficacy, meaning they are very effective in preventing infection, and a good safety profile. So I think this is very encouraging. The priority dispensing of the vaccine when available is to start with healthcare workers. And some of that is related to risk, but also some of that is related to maintaining our healthcare workforce, because with ongoing community transmission, our healthcare workers have risk of acquiring the disease from the community as well. And we need to keep our healthcare workers able to care for everyone as frontline workers. So likely we'll see the beginnings of vaccine deployment by the end of December in small numbers, and then hopefully into January have increasing availability as these are approved.
As far as when the vaccine might make its way to the general population, what is your prediction on that?
I think to the general population, we're probably looking at sometime in the middle of next calendar year. You know, the strategies from the preliminary assessment of how to deploy this is to start with frontline workers and healthcare workers. And that includes healthcare workers of all types. You know, we're not talking about just nurses and physicians, but we're talking about people that are in the healthcare setting that could be exposed to the virus. And then we're talking about next to be deployed to long-term care facilities, both staff and residents, and then looking at at-risk populations, and then the general population at large. And so likely we're looking at the people that don't have risk factors for disease or fit into some of those first groups, probably mid to late 2021, that it'll reach the general population.
As you know, there may be pockets of resistance to accepting a vaccine. What would you say to people who are suspicious about a vaccine?
Well, I think because people have heard that things have been, you know, sped up. It is part of Operation Warp Speed for one of the vaccine candidates. But what that means is that things were taken out of the way. The things like sort of traffic is the way I might describe it. In that when the pandemic started in March and April, all of our research activities, all of our effort was really directed towards COVID response and COVID vaccine trials. And so when you say that things have been expedited, it's sort of removing some of the other like places in line, but not really removing the safety measures or the science. So the vaccine clinical trials still had to meet the safety criteria, had to be reviewed and approved in that fashion. It's just that they were put at the top of the list, and all of the resources have been built together. People that were doing non-COVID related research have been supporting COVID related research. And so I want to reassure people that just because this has come through fast doesn't mean there's been compromises in safety or efficacy. So I hope that's reassuring.
Dr. Susan Bliesdale, thank you for that update. We appreciate your joining us.
Thank you.
And we're back in a minute with Grammy-winning vocalist Kurt Elling.
Latinos, who make up 1/3 of the population, continue to power the city that works.
These are the people that are working 3 jobs, knowing that COVID is out there. Those are the people that need the help, and we should help them.
Grammy-winning jazz singer and Chicago native Kurt Elling may not be able to perform for a live crowd these days, but that hasn't stopped him from holding court at the celebrated Green Mill for a series of virtual concerts. Take a look.
There was a boy, a certain strange enchanted boy. They say he traveled very far, over land and sea.
Elling is adapting during the COVID-19 shutdown by performing via live streams that viewers pay to watch, like any other live show. He has one planned for this Sunday at 3 p.m. entitled Christmas in Chicago, streamed live once again from the Green Mill. And jazz singer Kurt Elling joins us now. His recent album, Secrets Are the Best Stories, was just nominated for a Grammy Award in the Best Jazz Vocal category. Kurt Elling, congratulations, and great to see you on Chicago Tonight.
Thank you, Paris. Thanks for having me once again.
All right, so everyone knows it's really difficult for working musicians out there right now, and you've put this marvelous series of live stream concerts together at the Green Mill. They look great, they sound great. How have they been going?
It's been a pleasure to sing. It's been a pleasure to be able to pay my musicians a fraction of what they're worth, but at least something. It's been a pleasure to have time at the Green Mill, even when it's been completely empty. It's important for me to be able to sing. It's an identity. It is a craft. It is an expression of my physiology to be able to vibrate with sound at these levels, and so it's been a real godsend to me.
Especially the way you sing. It is a craft. And how do you deal with not having a live audience there and the energy that a live audience brings?
Well, there's a couple of ways. One, you could think of it as a studio take. You know, when we're making records in the studio, there's generally nobody around, and oftentimes there's nobody in the room. There's maybe nobody within 30, 40 feet of you. And you give your all and you focus on the music and singing as well as you can, performing as well as you can, playing to the other musicians. That having been said, at the Green Mill, it's easy enough for me to, I should say, imagine my audience there. I've played there so many nights and I've seen so many beautiful faces over the years, and the ghosts are available all the time. And frankly, there are 5 cameras looking at me, so I can play to those as well. You know what that feels like.
Absolutely. The ghost of Al Capone there at the Green Mill. Is this a way for performers to make a living right now? Is this sustainable? I mean, I saw you've streamed them on Facebook. You've done subscription series. Is this a way that musicians can make money because they're hurting right now?
Well, you can make some amount, but it's nothing like the kind of touring schedule that I would usually have. Usually I'm on the road upwards of 200 nights a year. And to do a handful of live streams, even though it's a pleasure, and even though we can broadcast to several, I should say, 1,000 more people on a given occasion than we usually do, it's nothing like the paycheck, the experience, the exchange that we have with a live audience. And it's nothing like the schedule that we have for a regular year. It's something. It's better than nothing. It's survival. I can't quite say that it's break even yet.
So you're definitely hot to get back on the road and performing in front of audiences, as all other musicians are. You know, you recently moved back to Chicago. You were in New York for 11 years after being from Rockford, to going to the U of C, growing up in music here. What's it like to be back?
Well, I mean, it's COVID time, so it's tough to say. We're happy to be back. We have so many beautiful friends and family members here that we've been longing to reconnect with on a more regular basis, and we can't, let alone all the folks I would have seen just glancingly performing for live audiences at the Mill or at the City Winery or at Orchestra Hall, or interacting with other musicians who I would have gone out to see their gigs by now. Let alone going to, you know, the zoo with my kid, let alone going to the museum with my daughter, let alone, you know, all these kinds of things that you can't do because of COVID. So it's a little bit tough to say. I love the sights, sounds, and smells. I'm not experiencing most of them, as most people are not.
And do you think that the music scene in Chicago, the jazz scene, the independent venues, can they come roaring back once we're vaccinated, or will there be permanent damage here?
My hope is that enough of the places that are vital and necessary survive until that time. If we can get open, if we can get back to full employment of the wait staff, of the musicians, people are holding on. Whoever can make it to the finish line is going to be, I think, overburdened with willing patrons. It's going to be a matter of when that timing is.
Last question for you, Kurt. You got a Christmas show this weekend. What can viewers expect?
Well, thankfully, I was able to put out a holiday record several years ago, and we'll be quoting things from there, and also some brand new compositions. And my dear friend, Liz Wright, who's an incredible singer, moved up here from Georgia a handful of years ago, and she'll be singing with me as well. And I can't wait. If you haven't heard of Liz Wright, you need to. If you haven't heard her, you need to. So I'm going to make that available as well for the show.
All right, we are noting that. We're going to listen to another performance in just a moment, but for now, our thanks to Kurt Elling. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Paris.
And back in a minute to wrap things up, but first we take a look at the weather.
Chicago Tonight is made possible in part through the generous support of the Julius Frankel Foundation.
And that is our show for this Thursday night, abbreviated to bring you special pledge programming. Please join us tomorrow night at 7 for the Week in Review. We leave you tonight with more from Kurt Elling's virtual concert at the Green Mill. Now, for all of us here at Chicago Tonight, I'm Paris Schutz. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.
Closed captioning is made possible in part by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, wishing all a happy and healthy holiday season.